You're very welcome to episode 6 of the Walk and Talk Improvement podcast series. In this episode, we're exploring the importance of effective leadership and governance to improve patient safety. I'm Roisin Egenton. I'm a Programme Manager in the HSE National Quality and Patient Safety Directorate, and I was delighted to interview 3 prominent and outstanding leaders in healthcare from both sides of the border here in Ireland. I interviewed Dr. Orla Healy, National Clinical Director for Quality and Patient Safety, as well as Dr. Colm, Chief Clinical Officer of the HSE. And from Northern Ireland, I met Dr. Aideen Keaney, Director of Health and Social Care Quality Improvement, Northern Ireland. Some of the topics we discussed include their own personal career pathways that led them to their current leadership positions, and some of their inspirations and influencers along the way. The importance of clinical leaders in effecting improvement, and the challenges of ensuring quality and patient safety is on the agenda of senior management to integrate clinical and corporate governance and put quality and safety at the fore. Our conversations were peppered with personal reflections and anecdotes that I think we can all appreciate and learn from. My first interview was with Dr. Orla Healy, who explained her role and that of the National Quality and Patient Safety Directorate in the HSE.
Thanks very much, Roisin, and thank you for having me. Delighted to be here with you today and to do this podcast. So this is a new directorate. It follows on corporate centre review and based on the recommendations of the patient safety strategy that called out as one of its commitments the need for additional clinical leadership for quality and patient safety. So this is by no means a greenfield site. I am building on the tremendous work of my predecessors and my colleagues, many of whom have remained with the team. So quality and patient safety has been a formal entity within the HSE since 2008. That was the year that Building a Culture of Patient Safety, the Madden report, was published. And since then we've had various iterations, but the most recent one has seen the assurance function merge with the improvement function. That's a very natural continuum that you would expect to see in a health service that's committed to being a learning organisation and one that's promoting a culture of quality and patient safety. And by embedding a culture of quality and patient safety, I mean having an organisation that reports when things go wrong, acknowledges it openly and discloses it, reviews those incidents, analyses the learning from those incidents, shares that learning, and is on a journey to continually improve the quality and the safety of the services that it provides.
Orla and I went on to discuss accountability for quality and safety in the system, and our conversation moved to Just Culture, a values-based supportive model for shared accountability.
Ours is a just culture. A just culture within which we operate a restorative approach. Increasingly, the focus is on just cultures and restorative approaches. And that's because for too long there was this either a blame culture or a no blame culture, and ours is neither. So a just culture is one that it's a values-based supportive model of shared accountability. It's called out within our incident management framework, and it proposes that the main focus when things go wrong or when we review incidents is on an analysis of the system and not focusing on the individual. So an organisation accepts appropriate responsibility and accountability. Individual practitioners should not be held accountable for systems failings over which they as individuals have no control. That said, those individual staff are not absolved from the need to behave responsibly, and neither are they allowed to behave recklessly or without professionalism. just culture doesn't tolerate conscious disregard for clear risks or deliberate acts of harm, but rather it provides a psychological safety for staff so that they can both report errors and seek advice and help when they're stretched by an issue beyond their competence.
So it's not just looking at, like you say, the blame and the no blame, but looking at the bigger pictures and the factors that contributed to an incident, and more importantly, the learning from the incident.
Precisely, and providing staff with the psychological safety to come forward and be in a position to trust the work environment and the wider system in order to do that. Because
I think there has been a fear in hospitals in particular, but also in community health organisations and the ambulance service, that an increase in incident reporting reflects negatively on their service. But I think the Just culture is helping to turn that on its head.
It's quite the contrary. We like to see high levels of incident reporting, and one of our metrics is that the category 1, or the more serious incidents, would account for less than 1% of all of the incidents reported. Mm-hmm. So counterintuitively, a service that has a high level of incidents reported is probably a safer service, because it reflects on that culture of identifying and coming forward and reporting when things go wrong.
The final part of our interview moved back to clinical leadership and the opportunity, with our current system reform, to further integrate and embed a quality and patient safety ethos.
We're very fortunate to have excellent clinical leadership and very prominent clinical leadership at every level within the organisation. And quality and patient safety is foremost on every clinician's mind, regardless of their discipline. That's why most people go in to clinical professions. They go in because they want to make people's lives better. They want to cure diseases. They want to fix systems. They want to continually improve. And safety obviously is foremost. Above all else, you do no harm. But the fact is that harm does occur, and continual improvements are required. It's not unique to us, it's not unique to healthcare, it's not unique to Ireland. And so I would like to see quality and patient safety front and centre of every management agenda, not just the clinical agenda, but the executive agenda also. So we need to see that integration between clinical and executive management that puts quality and patient safety to the fore. And that's happening increasingly in our system. We have clinical directors, we have dedicated clinical directors for quality and patient safety. We have a very skilled workforce in quality and patient safety who dedicate their careers to quality and safety methodologies. So we have an opportunity now with the next iteration of health service reforms to further integrate and embed that quality and patient safety ethos, putting it to the front and centre on the agenda.
I next had the opportunity to meet the HSE's Chief Clinical Officer, Dr. Colm Henry. We discussed aspects of his own career to date and what has influenced him along the way, as well as how he manages demands for his time in one of the most senior clinical leadership roles in Ireland.
Well, thanks for having me, Roisin, first of all. So, looking back, like other healthcare professionals, I was drawn into healthcare because I wanted to make a difference at a personal level. And that's what people, whether you're a nurse, a doctor, physiotherapist, an occupational therapist, that's what brings you into that kind of training, is making a difference and acquiring skills which can make a difference to people when they're at their most vulnerable, that is to say, when they're sick. So that's what brought me into medicine, and that is very much informed and framed my own background, both as a clinician, but also later on when I went into local and then national leadership roles. And the people who impressed me great were, of course, some mentors I had as a junior doctor, people who had strong values, not in a cheesy way, but whose work, consultants I can think of I worked with over the years, who were extremely strong on patience, on good care, on consistency, and set very high standards for me as a training junior doctor, and for themselves too, standards which were very hard to. So when I look back, I had so many over the years: Killian Toomey in Cork, Michael Hyland, late Michael Hyland, people who had showed levels of diligence and levels of commitment to medicine that I'm still envious of.
Do you feel your own career path has been a straight line, or has it moved and diverged at various points?
Well, like a lot of people, I tripped into things. I trained in Scotland as a junior doctor. Then I took a job up in Cork as a consultant, and then became the first clinical director in my hospital. And it was from that a series of, I suppose, opportunities came up, and then you look at the opportunities to make change as a doctor at a different level, and not just at the individual level across a consulting table or in an emergency department, but things you can do to bring about improvement for a greater number of people. And that's, I suppose, what attracts you then into international roles is that opportunity that you have to make a difference on a larger population type scale. And I took this job up as Chief Clinical Officer back over 4 years ago, and at that time I couldn't have guessed what was about to come a couple of years after, in the form of a pandemic, something that was a challenge that none of us expected, and certainly for those of us who were, if you like, caught in particular roles at the time, demanded that we either try sink or swim, adapt and lead, or get engulfed.
How do you manage the volume of demands for your time and work requests that you receive?
What I see myself as is a vehicle for the voice of clinicians and experts from all disciplines who work with me, and that's an important part. I take that part of my work extremely responsibly, I can assure you. So there are people out there, maybe some listening, some not, who know how much I pester and harass people leading up sometimes to interviews or to communications or to engagements with politicians, to make sure that everything I say is as accurate as possible. And in answer to your question, of course there's lots of demands and time. I find if you're dealing with trying to triage your time or triage your or if you like, stratify what the importance of what your of the different demands on you, it helps if there's some overarching vision. And I'm not saying that I'm the sole occupant of a vision for healthcare, but I have an idea of what good healthcare looks like, informed by how I work myself and informed by the many experts who work with me, public health, nursing, and so on. So it helps if you, for example, if you think, well, there are certain things we need to promote in healthcare today. Of course, expert healthcare, and of course, people who are highly trained delivering care at the top of their license, be it in the community or hospitals. But there's also messaging you can give by what you sponsor and promote. For example, the concept of different professions delivering care outside what people perceive as a traditional form of delivering care through a consultant-delivered model. So what I try to do, and I suppose it might be somewhat easier for me as a consultant, is try to promote ways of giving care which are outside the traditional ways of giving care, and on which we're going to have to depend if we're going to have a more holistic healthcare system that is delivered truly seamlessly across hospital and community. So it helps in looking at all different engagements that you're asked to partake in, if you have some idea of, well, what is it? What are we trying to celebrate and acknowledge here, apart from any individual achievement? What are we trying to celebrate or acknowledge in terms of the pointers of where we want healthcare to go?
Going back to Colm's reflections on how the pandemic propelled his role as HSE Chief Clinical Officer into quite a public-facing position, when the people of Ireland looked to him for information and reassurance at a time of great uncertainty, I asked him about the role of healthcare leaders in delivering public messages.
What I would say about all healthcare professions, whether it's doctors, nurses, occupational therapists, social workers, is they're very trusted. People trust them, and for example, surveys by the Medical Council describe, despite periodic scandals in healthcare, describe a very high level of trust of the general public in the medical profession, to take one example. So, and that's because healthcare professionals they're trained and conditioned to deal with patients, as I said, in very vulnerable settings, and it demands empathy, it demands compassion, it demands clarity in the way you break sometimes quite difficult news. Now, how you transpose that onto a national level is not, I don't think it's as easy and seamless as it sounds, but the same principles undermine it. And that is that you bring expert knowledge, either your own or somebody else's that you're satisfied represents expert knowledge, and then you explain what that means to people, and you explain it and tell them the truth, even when it's difficult, and then you explain how you hope things are going to get better. So when we look at the pandemic, the truth is, in the first year particularly, we knew we wanted to get across a river. We didn't know how we were going to get across a river, and sometimes it was taking one paving stone at a time and sometimes moving backwards. But I think what was an important principle for any of us who are in those positions at the moment, whether in NEFIT or within the HSE, was to have a consistent message for the public, to tell the truth, explain when things changed, have some degree of hope, but realistic hope. And again, that is something all clinicians would know from their own professional experience. People who are ill like to hear a hopeful message, but they don't like to be deceived.
Colm and I continued the conversation around education and continued professional development opportunities for healthcare professionals, both clinical and non-clinical, in leadership and quality. Colm made particular reference to the RCPI Postgraduate Certificate in Quality Improvement Leadership, which was formerly a diploma course and is funded by the National Quality and Patient Safety Directorate.
We're looking to frame this just around clinicians alone, because I think it's as, if not even more important, that we condition, encourage and facilitate managers in hospitals to speak the language of quality improvement. And one of the keynote achievements of the past few years was that diploma in quality improvement that was set up by Philip Crowley back in the OQID. I was part of the first cohort coming through, and at that time it was interesting to see a mix of people, both clinicians and managers, coming together to learn a common language, not in separate silos, but working together or doing a diploma together at least. And I know that it's multiple iterations since that course has been refined. So I believe strongly one of the things Tony O'Brien did in his time was create that leadership, the Masters in Leadership and other. There needs to be a supported ongoing development, not just for clinicians, but for hospital managers. Where clinicians get frustrated is they find they go into these roles and they're held to account, but for things that they're not responsible for. And where managers get frustrated is that they find themselves cornered off into finance and headcounts and HR issues, and unable to deal or understand with safety or quality issues. There's a clear common interest there, and I think that if there's a missing piece, it's to build on that leadership support, be it in the form of diplomas, masterships, courses, ongoing professional development. But it is remarkable to think that the people who run perhaps the most complex institutions you can imagine, namely hospitals or healthcare institutions, that there is no one single qualification and no one single form of continued professional development that they need. I can't think of anything more important for them.
We wrapped up our discussion talking about the challenges of ensuring quality and patient safety is on the agenda of senior management, particularly when operational challenges such as finance and human resources often take centre stage.
Well, can I acknowledge, before I answer the question, the work of Jennifer Barron, her team and yourselves in your persistence and doggedness in this area, because that's exactly what it takes. One of the first management posts I took up was when I was a consultant. I was on the executive management team of the Mercy Hospital, my own hospital, and it was at the time of the economic collapse in this country, and there was an acute cutback on the allocation of budgets to hospitals of an enormous amount of 20+%. And understandably, we found ourselves on the executive management team discussing late into the night, around and around and around again, financial issues, curtailment, prioritisation, and so on. And we did that at the expense of discussing what what the whole hospital was and should have been about, which was about the delivery of healthcare and how we could prioritise elements of healthcare and how we could try and make sure to protect the most vulnerable and the most dependent parts, people coming to our hospital at that particular time. So when I look, as I said to you earlier in this podcast, I'm lucky and I'm informed by many experts, and I take ideas from them shamelessly, and I'm also inspired by them very shamelessly. So when I look at the persistence of the QI team, I was the QI team, now the QPS team, as I said, working in this with the boards, for example, at the Mater Hospital on Temple Street, in doggedly persisting through me to harass and harangue our own board in HSE and indeed the executive management team. That's what it takes. If you don't give it space, that space will be filled by talks of headcounts, of finance, and then that in turn frames all the discussion of healthcare. And healthcare is enabled by finance, is enabled by headcounts, but it shouldn't be framed by them. So what needs to happen, and what Jennifer and her colleagues have worked so hard at, is trying to frame where decisions are made or accountability is held, for example, at board meetings, is trying to frame the discussion around quality. And that's always a work in progress. There's no perfect way of doing it. But what has emerged over the years, certainly here through that work, and I'm certainly proud to be associated with it, is a kind of a menu of different quality metrics which help sensitize board members or executive management team members to how healthcare has been delivered, the quality of healthcare, the relative safety of it, but also makes them incrementally more fluent in the language of healthcare impact and healthcare quality and so on. So I think persistence, doggedness, and making sure that there's always protected time and that you're trying to frame every discussion around healthcare outcomes at patient level.
In my final interview, I met Dr. Aideen Keaney, Director of Health and Social Care Quality Improvement Northern Ireland. As with Orla and Colm, I asked Aideen about her career path and sources of inspiration for her, as well as insights she has gained in her career to date.
If I think about my own career and what has led me to being in this particular role, I suppose I have to go back and say that, first and foremost, I'm a paediatric anaesthetist and intensivist. And I've been working before I took up this particular role for over 17 years at consultant level in those two areas. And obviously, I suppose intensive care in particular is a very complex, dynamic, high-risk healthcare setting. And within that setting, patient safety is always at the forefront of everybody's minds, and it's paramount that we focus on that. So because of the years that I've been working in that area, I developed, I suppose, a more formal interest in patient safety, and had the opportunity to undertake the Scottish Patient Safety Programme Fellowship, and that gave me skills, knowledge and experience in the application of a quality improvement methodology to improvement and to addressing safety issues, but it also gave me some skills in relation to clinical leadership in relation to safety and quality improvement. And through that particular programme, then I was successful in being appointed as a clinical governance lead within the children's hospital that I was working in at that time. So I was able to use the skill and knowledge that I had from the fellowship to lead improvement in response to some safety issues, and also, I suppose, in response to potential safety issues and how we would address those. And that led on then to me, while I was still working clinically, to also taking on a role as clinical lead for patient safety and quality improvement at trust level, where I worked as, I suppose, a more strategic level, working beyond the children's hospital, which was also, I suppose, a very interesting role as well. And again, I was able to use the skills and the knowledge and experience that I got from that particular fellowship, and obviously the experience I'd got within the role of clinical governance lead. And then as time went by, I also then had an opportunity to apply for a Generation Q fellowship with the Health Foundation. And that particular fellowship focused, I suppose, more on the leadership aspects of leading for improvement as opposed to the technical aspects. And it opened up a whole new world to me around the importance of context and the importance of personal awareness within leadership, and also then the importance of relationships when leading improvement. And with all of that, I suppose, experience and moving through those various roles, and also the clinical background that I came from, that then led me to applying for the post of Director of Quality Improvement within the Public Health Agency of Northern Ireland, which was a brand new director post that was advertised in April 2019. And key within that role is to shape, plan, and implement HSCQI, which is our Health and Social Care Quality Improvement Network for Northern Ireland. And I've been in that post now since 2019. And that was the aspiration to shape, plan, and implement the network. And as we all know, COVID came along and sort of changed the approach to that, shall we say, for the first 18 months to 2 years. But thankfully, now that we're in recovery, um, I, and along with colleagues from across the system, are focusing again on establishing the network.
In all of your leadership development training that you've spoken about now, were there any light bulb moments or any experiences that you feel have stayed with you?
Yeah, I would say that there's been quite a few light bulb moments. And in relation to leading quality improvement, I would say that there are 3 or 4 key light bulb moments. And for me, they are the importance of data when leading improvement. And it doesn't matter whether it's a very basic form of data or whether it's high level data. I think we need to always have data to describe our improvement journey and the progress we're making, and whether we need to make a change as we move along. And our focus, obviously, on outcomes in particular, particularly patient and service user outcomes. Um, it's also been a light bulb moment for me when leading quality improvement, the importance of relationships. I referred to it just a moment ago in relation to the Generation Q fellowship. And without a shadow of a doubt, I truly believe that relationships is where it all happens. And it's really important when leading improvement that we do focus enough time and energy on engaging the team, engaging as wide and diverse a group of stakeholders as possible, and where possible to include obviously our service users and our patients. So I think engaging the team or engaging people is a huge element within leading quality improvement. And then another, I suppose, key light bulb for me has been, I suppose, the importance of quality improvement as a space in which we can use our creativity, or a space that can release creativity. Because I think creativity is actually what leads to um, good ideas or good solutions to either safety issues or areas where we need to see improvement. And I think key to all of this for me was the um, the time that I was a Scottish Fellow when I was on that 12-month program. As you probably know, Roisin, within part of that program, each fellow has to lead an improvement project within their own area of influence. And at that time, I was working in the intensive care unit. And my project focused on implementing a safety brief within the multidisciplinary team, and doing so on a daily basis. And that the purpose of that was to improve communication around patient safety issues or potential patient safety issues, addressing them within the day, and trying to reduce the likelihood of any safety issues occurring, say, on the next shift or the next day. And key to leading that piece of work is, as I say, the importance of data, the importance of engaging that team right across the multidisciplinary team, be it from healthcare support worker, um, all the nursing staff, all the medical staff, all the allied health professions, and I'm talking about all grades and all disciplines within there. And in that particular program, or that project that I led upon, it was a wonderful time actually within my career, because the team, while we worked really well effectively doing our clinical work day to day on the floor, our focus on establishing the safety brief actually created more meaningful relationships and a common purpose. And we actually all enjoyed creating this safety brief, and seeing how effective it was in helping us to do our work. And also within that particular piece of work as well, within that project, it was an opportunity for us to use creativity in order to engage the team and to keep us motivated. And at that particular time, I decided to devise a mascot, a little pink cow called Daisy, which would represent the piece of work that we were doing. So all the paperwork we were using would have Daisy's image on it. Any posters in the team room would have Daisy's image on it. And so it was a way of people looking at that and going, oh, we need to focus on the safety brief. We need to focus on patient safety. And it also meant that we had something else that we were connected over. Everybody started to really like this particular mascot, this cow. And so when we succeeded in establishing the safety brief, I was able to bring in a little life-sized fiberglass cow to sort of say, well done, everybody. We have now achieved our aim. We have now implemented the safety brief. And that brought great joy to the team. And when I look back, we did this during the winter time, and it was a time when we were under a lot of pressure, winter pressures, and really sick children in the intensive care units. A really intense, dynamic time again. But despite all of that, we were able to bring our creativity and our positivity to establishing this particular safety brief for this initiative. And then what happened with that was that because we had this cow on display in a glass cabinet on a corridor in the hospital to say, well done, intensive care, for doing this particular piece of work, it started a conversation with other staff from across the hospital, so much so that they wanted to do improvement work as well, so much so that they wanted to use Daisy to endorse their work. And of course, we gave them Daisy's image, and we gave the fiberglass cow to them for certain celebration events. So it actually, through that piece of work, that creativity and that development of a mascot, I think, was huge in succeeding to engage not just the team that we were in, but wider than that team, and actually beyond the children's setting into the adult setting. And in fact, regionally across Northern Ireland, it also engaged people working in quality improvement, be it in the children's wards in some of the district general hospitals, and indeed some of the adult parts of those hospitals as well. So those would be my light bulbs, would be data, the importance of engaging the team, the importance of using creativity to maintain momentum, to engage as many people as possible, and to create a sense of ownership when leading improvement. And I suppose just to say too that Daisy still exists within the children's hospital. She's still in a glass cabinet on display saying, "Well done, everybody." And I have brought a version of her with me into this director role that I'm in as well. So she represents the journey, I suppose, of quality improvement for all of us. My insights in all of this, I would say, are that, as I said before, with the light bulbs, data, engaging people, and using creativity, to me is applicable at all levels of our health and social care system, regardless of what the improvement initiative is. So to me, that in itself has been a really important insight that I have been able to gather over the course of the last 10 or so years that I've been involved in leading quality improvement. I've also, I suppose, discovered the power of what is referred to in leadership as gesture and response. And I suppose the particular area where I saw that happen was the creation of the mascot called Daisy. By giving Daisy, or allowing Daisy to be part of other people's improvement work, the response was others wanted to run with an improvement initiative. They were highly motivated. And then that was a catalyst for further improvement right across the Children's Hospital, the organisation, and the system. So I think there's something powerful in understanding a simple gesture like saying, yes, you can have what I have, use it yourself in whatever way you want to achieve improvement. That's what all of us are trying to do. So I think there's something important in leadership of understanding the importance of a gesture and then noticing what the response is. So that has given me, I suppose, great insight, I think, into being open to making other gestures within my leadership role. I've also discovered, I think too, that change happens one conversation at a time. And I have seen that in every aspect of my leadership, again, from working clinically frontline to now working strategically. And I think that we need to allow ourselves in the system time for conversation. And I suppose it's purposeful conversation, and it's conversation that should be focused, I believe, on curiosity, being curious about somebody else's view, being curious about why somebody thinks something is the right approach to take, and being open to listening and understanding others' viewpoints. I think within those conversations too, I've discovered it's really important to understand or notice if I'm making an assumption about something or if somebody else is, and being alert to assumptions and being able to have conversations about them and clarifying an assumption is an assumption. We actually need to go deeper to understand the meaning. And again, I suppose talking about conversation, it just brings me around again to the importance of relationships in leading improvement. Conversations, I believe, are the vehicle through which we can create the meaningful relationships that we need for improvement. So conversation as an entity itself is really important. And I suppose for the system, and particularly for frontline teams, I would just love them to continue to have conversations and perhaps be given some additional time, if at all possible, to have purposeful conversations as I've just described. And then my last insight, and it's come home to me, particularly when we were developing our strategy and when we were beginning to lead on a piece of improvement work that I mentioned earlier, focusing on improving access to care. And that is how, leadership requires courage. And I suppose up until being in this particular role, I probably wasn't quite as aware of what that means. And I think what happens to a lot of us, we strive for perfection, and particularly working clinically, our patients expect and deserve no less. So that is right. But there's something about in leadership getting to a moment where we accept that we have good enough conditions to make that first step in leading. And sometimes I believe we are paralyzed by the necessity that we believe is there to have everything perfect before we begin to lead improvement. So I have learned and I've observed, even to myself, that I need to remind myself sometimes that getting to a point where the conditions are good enough to have courage, to be brave, to make that first step, but safe in the knowledge that if you apply a quality improvement approach to that first step, what we need to do then is evaluate the effectiveness of that first step. Look at the data. Did our first step have the required result, what we hoped it to be? Do we need to change our approach based on what we've now observed? Do we need to stop that approach and think of something completely different? So I think if we understand, we can make the first move, but we are safe in the knowledge that a QI approach will help us quickly evaluate whether it's appropriate or not to keep moving in that particular way, whether we need to change the way to improve, or whether we need to stop and think again. But I think one of the biggest things in leadership is having the courage and knowing when to make that first move.
And with that, we have reached the end of this podcast episode. I hope that you enjoyed hearing some of the personal insights and reflections from my guests, and that they have sparked some inspiration for you, whether it be to progress leadership development opportunities, or tap into your creative side and discover your own Daisy the Pink Cow to encourage and motivate you and those around you to strive for improvements and make our health services better and safer for everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and as always, please remember you can listen back to this and other episodes wherever you get your podcasts. And please subscribe to get notifications when new episodes are added.